Welcome back to Switch to Linux. So today what we are going to do is get back to some of our GIMP tutorials. We are going to look at filters today. So looking at our filters, I'm not a huge expert on all of the filters. I don't use all of them a lot. We're just going to introduce you to where they are, how to adjust with some settings and things like that. Now, a lot of people have still asked me for GIMP tutorials, but I hear more GIMP tutorials. Guys, tell me what you need to know. I've covered the vast majority of everything I use. There's a few more things that I haven't really covered, like how do I keep all the consistencies in all my banners and things like that. And so what we need to make sure that we keep in mind is that I want to make sure that we are covering the information that we need to be covering, but I don't know what else you guys need to see. So let me know down in the comments the other things you want to see. What I still have on my list, obviously we're going to do filters today. I'll talk about some extensions. I actually have a book that's going to be going out to be published here within the next week or so. And so I'm going to do one on book cover design. But I haven't seen a whole lot of other things where people are need to know what questions do you have? What can we help you with? Leave me those types of comments and we'll see what we can figure out. Leave me those pains and those struggles with GIMP and we'll see what we can figure out. And so with that being said, what I'd like to do today is we're going to dive over and look at our filters. So here we loaded up GIMP, and I have my cat picture here. So we're going to walk through the filters. So the filters has its own menu up here at the top. Now, to keep in mind with these filters, it will filter by whatever you have selected. And sometimes in GIMP, it's not always all that obvious. So if I go ahead and select all, you'll see that I have this nice banner around the cats. And even if I do other things, then that kind of remains the selection point unless I really change my selection. So just to highlight this, I'm going to go ahead and start entering some text. So if I want to take this text let's go ahead and I'm going to make this text white. And let's go ahead and move it. So we're going to go ahead and move the text down here. Now, in some instances, you might still have the main outer layer selected. If you do, for whatever reason, and you go to do a drop shadow, the filter may drop the shadow in a place that you may not expect. And so just keep in mind, and you'll encounter this if you're messing with layers, you're doing filter selections, you're adding to layers or things like this. But let's go ahead and just do a quick drop shadow and see what happens. So you'll see here that it actually added the drop shadow to the main image, not to the text like I wanted to. And that's because I had previously selected the outer image and I didn't really change that selection. So let's go ahead and undo this. And then what I'm going to do is to deselect everything. So if you get that type of result, hold Control, Shift, and A, unless you've set a deselect elsewhere, and then what you'll see is that the outer layer there is no longer has our yellow and black border. Now our text does. So now if I drop my shadow, which I can actually do with Control F or repeat the drop shadow, so if I go ahead and just go at the drop shadow, now you'll see it will actually apply to the actual text. And then you'll see what it does. Now, unlike Photoshop, where it adds to the layer as a layer property, there are not layer properties in GIMP, and so it actually adds another layer. So if you go to move this text later, make sure that you are moving the text with the shadow itself. So you can do that by coming over here and clicking on the lock guys. And so now if I move, not that, if I move any one of these layers, it's going to move the shadow with the text layer itself. Now, something to keep in mind about the shadows is that a shadow is not always just to put a dark layer on things. It's also, you can use it to put a lighter layer on some things. So if I did want to keep this text as a darker text, but it were on a background that had some variable coloration to it, I might actually need to go ahead and add some other text to it. So maybe I wanted to put my text up here in the corner Some of it's okay to read, but when you get over here into the brown, it's a little more difficult. So don't forget that you can drop a white shadow as well. So let's go back to our light and shadow onto our drop shadow and play with some settings. So the color will actually tell you the indication of my shadow. So I'm actually going to do a white shadow this time. All right. So with our white shadow, you can select your offset. So these go off, and the offset is off to your right and your off down. So your X offset is to the right and your Y offset is down. But you can actually go negative if you want to push them up, up or to the left. You can do that. The blur radius is how big your blur is, and then you have an opacity setting to determine how opaque it should be. So if I want to do something that's very similar to just doing like an extra pixel around it, a solid pixel, I might do something like this, and you'll see that it gives us this nice layer here. Now, the cool thing about with GIMP is I can add multiple different layers here, and so if I want to now offset, we're going to keep that at 1, offset this. Instead of going 1, 1, we're going to go -1, -1. Now that'll effectively give us a stroke around the text. So you see how you can do that. And then each of these are their own separate layers. So I can actually experiment with that. Let's go ahead and just delete both of these layers here. Because the next thing we'll do with our filter is just have a quick look at things like your blur radius. So this is how blurry it actually looks. Let's go ahead and put that back to, let's do 2 and 2. So 2 down and 2 to the right. Do a blur radius of 5, push OK. Oh, silly me, I had did not have the text layer selected. Gotta go ahead and select the text layer there. All right. And let's go ahead and do that this time. So now you'll see that it gives us some fuzziness. Now another good thing with GIMP is that if you do want to just move the shadow around a little bit without having to redo the drop shadow, you can do it because it adds as a layer. So that's actually a good and a bad thing in this respect. So now you can see I can do a sort of a faint glow on the text just by doing that and manipulating the drop shadow. So all of your various filters operate in this general principle that you want to make sure that you're highlighting the part you want to highlight. Let's just go ahead and have a look at some of the filters that I use more frequently. I don't always use all these filters, like I said, but the ones that I do use, I know how to use a lot. I do a lot with text. That's actually what prevents me from using Krita, because Krita does have some text areas that are broken. I use, let's see, I will frequently use my bevel. So also on a text layer where we're going to take off the work on copy, you can go ahead and create a bevel layer to that. Now it's, I actually did that to the drop shadow layer. Let's go ahead and repeat that bevel layer. You don't really see it too well on the black text. Let's go ahead and make another text layer and do a bigger text layer. These cats are cute. There we go. And let's go ahead and use a different font over here. There we go. And let's change the color. Let's go with a blue. All right, and bolden it out a little bit. All right, so there's what my text looks like. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and add a bevel to this. Come down to Decor, hit the bevel, and then here you want to determine what your thickness is. You can work on a copy, which will add everything to a copy, and we also have different layers we can do. So we're going to go ahead and just adjust your thickness accordingly. So with these, sometimes you just kind of have to make some guesses, start with one, and then make some adjustments from there. So you see when you click on that, the one thing I got on this bevel is a little bit too much. You can see I got some black bordering. I don't really want that black bordering. So let's go ahead and adjust that a little bit. So let's go back down here to Decor, add bevel. Let's drop this down to maybe 5. So there we have some very nice beveling around this now. Now I kind of again wanted to do I wanted to do a like a border around this, but the border only applies to the main full image there. And so what we're going to do is to make a border is we're going to go back and do the drop shadows again. Just going to do one blur radius of 1, and then we're going to go ahead and repeat that with our -1. There might be a better way to do a stroke. We'll have to look around. I don't actually do strokes as much. So now we're going to take, let's see, just take this. Let's merge these layers down, merge down, and so now this is all of that. So now I actually have this nice beveled text with a border outline. It says these cats are cute. And then now, again, if I want to do a traditional drop shadow, I could do that. Let's see what other filters I usually use. Not a ton of other ones I usually use, but let's go ahead and talk about some other ones that I use enough to know exactly what they do and how they work. So we have blur, we have a Gaussian blur, motion, pixelize. So these guys here, what these various blurs are going to do, your blur has no settings, it just blurs. And you can see it more pronounced. Of course, I did it just on the text layer. Let's go ahead and adjust our main layer here. Let's go ahead and blur just our main layer. So you'll see it adds just a very faint blur to it, but it really doesn't have any settings or options. If you just need some very brief blur or something, you can do that. But if you actually need options, go ahead and pick your Gaussian blur. And here you can see that we have the ability to make some adjustments and then see what they would look like. You can lock or unlock this constrained proportions. So what this is going to do, and we'll go ahead and apply this, what this is going to do for you is you'll see it'll blur mostly on the side to side, but not the up and down ends. Okay, let's go ahead and pull that back up. Let's go the other way just so you can kind of see the difference. So we'll drop this back down to 1. We'll put this up to 36 now. So you see that now it kind of blurs up and down, not as much left and right. All right, you can also do things like a motion blur will allow you to, this will allow you to add a variety of different types of blurs, like the linear here. We have a radial and we have a zoom. Let's go ahead and do a zoom in there. Give that a second to render. And this is kind of what you get. So if you want to do like a star field type effect, that's the type of blur that you want to do. It's going to start with your center point, and then it's going to blur everything out as if you're zooming into the image. Now you can also do things with your motion blur, like the radial blur is pretty nice. Just go ahead and pick your radial blur. Again, these will take a little bit to render your appearance. But here is what the radial blur looks like. Effectively, like the camera's just kind of spinning around. So these are actually really cool effects. So you could do really nice things, particularly if you want to do something very artistic. So blurring is nice. We can do some pixelizing. So this is kind of what the pixel width would look like. So of course, the smaller this is, the the better it becomes. Let's go ahead and do 2 pixels, see what that looks like. So you see it's a little bit pixelized. Let me just zoom in on that. You'll see it's quite a bit more pixelized than it was. So hard to tell exactly how much I did with that degree of pixelization. But there's some other things. Let's see. I don't really use much in this one. I use sharpen a little bit. So you can use the sharpen to sharpen an image. So your blinds will give you, this will give you horizontal or vertical blinds. You can do various degrees of displacement. Number of segments. So that's what that one does. Okay, light and shadow, of course. We already talked about the drop shadow. Use that a lot. There's lens flares, gradient flares. Please be careful with your flares. Sometimes they're a little crazy. You can, you can. I've never used the sparkle one. I just wanted to use some natural way to talk about twilight. So if you want to twilightify your image, there you go. There's some sparkliness. Now my cats are vampires and all full of sparkliness. Yeah, I'm talking to you. Yeah, you. There's some other really nice ones, particularly your artistic. We have some nice things. Let's see. Actually, was it decor? Like coffee stains, neat. So you can do a variety of different stains. So if you want to simulate having coffee spilled over the image, there you go. We're just kind of randomly generating some coffee stains. That's kind of how that works. And then there's some other filters. So if you're doing things like wanting to make it look like an old video or something, you have the ability to add in those types of things. Let's see. There's old photo. There we go. There's how to make an old photo. Look. You'll notice that some of these do apply to pretty much every layer that there is. So keep that in mind. Let's discard those changes. That was making the changes on the copy. The one I was actually looking for is really nice ones. Is my okay, yeah, newsprints, video ripples. So this one here, if you want to simulate some type of newsprint, you can make adjustments over here. There's a variety of different colorations you can do. So this is kind of going to give you like the appearance as if something were coming out of like a newspaper effect. And here's your basic video, old video type rendering. So there's just so many different types of things that you can do. So as you're getting those creative juices floating, think about the types of things you'd really like to see on your individual images, and then you can make certain adjustments. You might just have to come down through your various filters and determine the types of things that you want to add. And just play around with some things. Most of these have options to work on, they don't all, of course, but many of them have options to work on your, work on alternate layers. And so that's the type of thing you might want to do. So there you go. There's how to do a basic page curl. Let's go ahead and play with some settings on that one. That's actually a cool one I've never looked at before, but it's pretty neat. Okay, so you can pick which corner is curling. You can go which direction it's kind of going. So inside of here is going to be a gradient, so you can do a variety of gradients. Let's look at a current gradient and then pick a gradient. Let's just try the purples gradient. Let's try that one. Change our opacity a little bit. See what that does. There you go. So that's going to grab our purples, and then that just kind of gives it almost like one of those like Mylar type feels to it. What I kind of want to be able to do with that, if I can, let me just play with that again. I like that one. That's a pretty cool one. A little gaudy, but you know, it's okay. I want to see if I can. Can't seem to adjust the size of it. I wonder if this one will take just a specific selection. Yeah, it doesn't do what I was anticipating. That's kind of a neat one. Okay, let's see. And of course, waves and winds. These guys here are going to give us some ripple effects. So we can smear, we can do a reflective. Let's cut our amplitude down quite a bit. we go. Give the kitties a little bit of a waviness to it. So those are just some of the filters. There's just so many fun things that you can do with it. Just kind of get in here and just play around with them a little bit, particularly if you need to do something. So what I'm going to be doing with the book design, I already have the front cover. I need to do the back cover. Basically what I need to do next is create the whole unified cover. All your book covers all happen all at once. And so I need to work on the back part. The front part's done because I need to do that for the ebook designs. But then that one, really, there's some shading, there's some effects. Some of the stuff is already done, like the whole front cover's done. We'll talk about how to go from the front cover and how I did some of that stuff. We'll talk about that. But leave me the comments below the other types of things you'd like to see in a GIMP tutorial. I'd be glad to talk more about those. I just need to know the types of things you need to see. So let me know what those would happen to be. So with that, thanks for watching. Again, if you like what we are doing over here at Switch to Linux, you can help support us by going to switchtolinux.com/support to see the current ways you can support us. Currently, we have a Patreon page, patreon.com/TomM, and there are also Amazon links down below. So thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.